Hello, hello. Thanks so much for joining me today, where we're going to be talking about how we can speak with greater impact. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessica Rice. I'm the founder of Jessica Rice Coaching, where I work with executive leaders and teams to create phenomenal impact within their industry. So today we're talking about a little bit more communication and why it's the key to our success. Some leaders speak to fill silence, while others speak to move industries. Which one are you becoming? So sometimes we have this phenomenon where we are highly experienced. We have so much knowledge and influence and information that we can share, but we continue to be overlooked. And it's not because we're lacking talent. It's because we don't know how to communicate with confidence or clarity, or even with strategic presence. And then we see others who may not have as much expertise as we carry, but they get invited to decision-making meetings and boardrooms and strategic planning because they know how to show up with vision and presence and conviction. Communication is really the unseen differentiator most leaders are not taught, but it shapes their entire trajectory. 89% of senior leaders say that executive presence impacts their promotion. And 98% of leaders say it's a learned, not an innate skill. So it's not just about what it is that you do. It's about how you communicate what you do, how you communicate your ideas, how you bridge the gap between what it is that you know would be an excellent solution or way forward to those who are making those decisions. This is a skill that determines your next opportunity, and it's the one that's often most overlooked, especially in today's market. We have AI, we have so many impacts that are happening within our industry right now. How we communicate the changes that are occurring, it's less about the technical expertise that we bring, even though that might seem prevalent to you. And it's more so how you are engaging others, how you're communicating, how you're relating, how you're networking. And all of this relies on your ability to communicate. What is reframing this for you? Well, this is going to help you to align with your team faster. It's going to build trust across layers of your leadership. And it signals readiness so that you can stretch your role and your influence across boundaries. This is something that enables you to become the go-to person who is listened to and not just someone who fills the room. Have you considered what your executive communication style is? Do you know? Some of us don't even know what our communication style is. And I think this is a really great place that we can begin to think about how we communicate, how we relate, how we demonstrate our worth, our values, our ideas. And so there is a formula, the 4 C's of executive communication, which outlines commanding, coaching, collaborative, and conceptual. Unfortunately, I struggle to really relate these communication styles back to anything that feels relevant to me sometimes. So we created a communication style quiz. And in this quiz, you will understand to a greater degree what your natural or your default communication style is, how you can start to leverage it to a greater extent, and how you can also start to learn other communication styles. And in there, you start to understand what a doer is, what a connector is, what a thinker can do, an influencer. And all of these relate back to those 4 executive communication styles. We're commanding, where we're direct, decisive, and outcome driven. Or if we're coaching style, this is where you're curious, growth oriented, and exploratory. Or collaborative, you're empathetic, you're inclusive, you're relationship driven or conceptual, visionary, big picture, ideas, all of this to influence others, influence change. They're not just labels, they truly are tools, and the best leaders know how to use them. So when I was coming up in my career, I was still a lead, a technical lead for my organization. And I started to have various ideas, and I started to share these ideas not only to my immediate supervisors, but to higher ups within the organization. And it started to get passed around, some of the things that I was sharing and some of the ideas that I felt would drive the business forward. And in that period of time, I was asked to take on a brand new product where we were going to build it from conception to completion. It was a multi-phased product, and it was completely new to me. This was a little bit more outside of my wheelhouse. And at the same time, I was also asked to present at strategic planning some of the ideas that had been coming up for me. Well, this was a very big and bold move for me because my natural communication style was as an influencer as well as a thinker. I love to share ideas, but I wasn't sure how to command the room. And I was asked to fly out to the East Coast. Now, I'm a West Coast girl, and how we operated on the West Coast is a little bit different than how they were operating on the East Coast. Most of the people that I was going to be speaking with had a very commander style of communication. And so I had to learn pretty quickly how I was going to show up in this space, how I was going to tell my story, tell my ideas, and share them with influence in a way that they were going to listen to me, that they were going to understand, that they would take it in and hear with greater understanding. This was a huge shift. This was scary for me. And so to step into this role required me to stretch myself beyond what I felt was even within my purview. But it didn't really matter because I was asked to go and do it. Well, lucky for me, I was able to figure it out well enough. And if you listen to any of my other recordings, then you would know that I also figured out how to have executive presence without being the loudest in the room, without combating or competing with some of the other executives, and not even arguing. Just figuring out how to show up and have presence and still be myself, still be authentic, and still get my voice heard. All of this was a huge learning experience for me, and it brought me to new heights. Not only did I get promoted, I then was able to go back to strategic planning with the owners of the company and be able to share more ideas and lead more initiatives and grow my team. If we don't think that communication matters, it does. If we don't understand how to communicate with people at various levels, then we're going to be missing out on opportunities that might present themselves if only we were willing to step out in a little bit more of our discomfort zone. It's not theoretical, and it's very timely for today's market. Our market is demanding and it's evolving. Leadership is very visible right now, and as we see more cuts happening to middle layers and middle management, our ability to communicate our ideas is even more crucial. We have to consider who we're talking to at any given moment, who our audience is, whether it's stakeholders, customers, across the organization, direct reports. Our communication is the determination of how we succeed, how we lead, how we move initiatives forward, and how our career trajectory is defined. You're being evaluated not just on what you do, but how you show up and how you speak, how you lead. The more that we can start to understand the various communication styles, the more that we can start to understand how to apply them. It's not appropriate always to be using a commanding communication style in a one-on-one conversation. Depends on your goals. But the more that we can understand our communication style, the more that we can also understand others. Are we meeting our audience where they're at? Are we speaking to their needs? Are we listening to them? Listening is, if not more important, just as important as speaking. So, how are you considering for yourself what you are leveraging within your authentic communication style? How you're able to adapt and be agile? How is your agility in relation to how you're showing up in different rooms, in different settings? I know a lot of the clients that I work with happen to be in tech. That's my background, and so I happen to work with a lot of tech leaders. Invariably, the largest issue that tech leaders face sometimes is that we're over analytical. We know how to tell you about every single detail. But if you're talking to someone who is a big picture thinker, that's not what they're interested in. And so we have to know how to adapt, to speak to what their needs are, and really get across that message that we're hoping that they will receive. The same thing for a coaching style or collaborative style, depending on the needs of the organization, depending on the needs of the project or what's coming up right now, the more that you can start to flex and adapt with those changes. So really consider how you want to start showing up for yourself and then showing up in service to your team, your organization, your stakeholders, your clients, your customers. What are their needs? Because the more that we can start to think outside of ourselves, the more that we can think of how we're in service to other people, the greater our ability to flex our communication style. When we get very wrapped up in worrying about what other people are thinking, or if they're understanding us, or do I look silly, or do I sound stupid, or am I contributing in the right ways, the harder it is for us to adapt and to change our communication style. So I really want you to consider for a moment, where do you feel like your default communication style is? Where do you fall back to whenever you're under pressure, when you're nervous, when things are coming up and stress is high? That is usually what our default communication style will bubble up as. And the more that we can start trying on and practicing other ways of communicating with other members of the organization, not just those that we're comfortable with, but people outside of our immediate network, the more that we will have an opportunity to expand and grow this muscle. So I want you to start asking yourself, is there another way that I can communicate this? Is there another way that I can achieve the same results? What is it that this individual needs to hear from me? What are they most interested in? What do they care about? What type of communicator are they? Do they tend to speak in stories? Do they tend to speak in details? Do they tend to just tell you exactly what they're thinking and how to get it done? The more that you can mirror who you're speaking with, the greater or the more effective your communication will be. And the more that you can start to look at it in those ways, I'm not saying becoming something different. I'm saying, how do you mirror their energy? How do you mirror what it is that they're looking for? So that you understand how you show up as a communicator in various circumstances. And a lot of this work has to come back to our why, what it is that we're hoping to accomplish, what our leadership value proposition is, what is our executive presence, what is our authority, what is our impact, what is our presence, so that we can start to understand where our natural strengths fall and where do we have some gaps. Where are some areas that maybe we know aren't our strong suit? And how do we then start working within that capacity to help build up that muscle so that we can start to feel more confident, more composed, more clear in our message. This is a skill that requires practice. It's a skill that requires application. It has to go beyond theory. So while I can sit here and tell you about the 4 executive communication styles, at the end of the day, what really matters is understanding your audience, understanding what are their core needs, what are they hoping to hear from you, what are they hoping to achieve, and structure your communication around their goals if you're wanting them to hear and listen to you. This can be tricky. This is a gap for most of us, especially if we are busy running from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, or building or behind a computer or whatever it is that we're doing within our daily lives. So if you haven't considered how you're showing up within your meetings, how you're showing up in your one-on-one conversations, how you're driving forward ideas, how you're showing up in group calls, start to think about, how do you want to start to be known? How do you want people to start thinking about you? If you're a quiet leader, a lot of the people I work with are quiet leaders. It's not about how you are the loudest. I want to make that very clear. Communication and speaking and structuring this, it's not about how loud you are. I am not a loud person by nature. How are you being strategic with your communication? Sometimes silence can be your best friend. It sets a point, it drives home your message, and it makes it very clear when delivered in such a way that what you mean is business, that you are to be taken seriously. When we're nervous, sometimes we start rambling, we start overspeaking, we start filling in a lot of words. So if we can slow down our speech patterns and we can start to breathe through it and have a plan in place and get out of those nerves, then we can start to communicate on other levels. We can start to communicate with people who may have a different way of communicating. And we can, most importantly, start to listen, start to understand what it is that they're saying, and ask ourselves, do I understand everything I need to know in order to communicate effectively? Am I understanding all of the pieces? Is there more that I need to know? And when we can start asking ourselves those questions in relation to how we respond, this is how we can bridge the gap between so many challenges and conflicts and negotiations that we're a part of every single day. When we can listen to understand, then we can start to speak in a way that has meaning and it has value, and other people will want to listen and hear. So if you're wondering, how do I continue to practice this? How do I know this? Well, first of all, I put into the comments a quiz, a communication quiz. So go ahead, take the quiz, find out what your communication style is so that you can start to learn how you show up in different settings, how you show up under pressure, how you show up under stress. Because again, that's where we default back to. Even when we're trying to work on something else, if we haven't strengthened that muscle, if we don't have enough awareness yet, then we're not going to be able to step into those new patterns until we have mastered or understand where we tend to fall when our brain is overwhelmed, because that is our default nature. When you can start to do that, then you can start to learn how you show up in different capacities. Knowing others is the key to knowing ourselves sometimes as well. So when we read about other communication styles, what they prefer, little tips in there, then we can think about, what is it that I could try today? What is one different little change that I could make in how I communicate today? This isn't going to happen overnight. But it's something that if you are consistent with how you are trying different ways of speaking, different ways of asking questions, different ways of speaking up, different ways of raising your hand or sharing or presenting, then you can start to think about, okay, I understand this is where I tend to want to fall, but this is what is needed of me or required of me right now. And this is how I feel comfortable showing up in that way. I'm not going to start yelling and commanding and demanding people, but I will match my energy. I will have a little bit more power. I will be a little bit more concise. I know that when I was speaking to my boss, who was very much the doer, he didn't want to know all of the details. He just wanted to know the main points to get it done. And when we can start to understand what their needs are, this is what they're looking for when it means, okay, who am I thinking about for the next role? Who am I thinking about for this next promotion? Who's the go-to person for this project, whatever it is? And when we can start to do that, now more doors are opening up for us. Now we're able to look beyond ourselves. So go ahead and take the quiz, see what your communication style is. If you're wanting other ways to start working on your leadership, your communication style, your executive presence, your brand, I encourage you to come check out the Powerhouse Legacy Collective. This is where we are meeting every single week, multiple times a week. If you can't come, then there's always a recording, but we're going through trainings and strategies and Q&A along with a multitude of other resources available to you to help you start to master all of these various aspects for yourself. As a coach, I don't believe in cookie cutter methods. I do believe in working with people where they're at and within their natural strengths, their wheelhouse, what they bring to the table, their zone of genius. This is what the Powerhouse Legacy Collective is about, is understanding that you are a powerhouse. And how do we tap into your natural strengths in a greater way? So if you're interested in knowing more about that, I'll go ahead and put into the comments. You can learn more and see if you'd like to get started. Being a part of the Powerhouse Collective is a monthly fee. It's $67 right now. That will be going up fairly soon. So if you want to get in on it, start participating, start growing in not only your leadership, but how you're starting to make an impact within your industry, then there's a wonderful community available for you with other leaders who are wanting to do the same things. All right, thanks so much for joining me today. I would love to know, what do you feel is your communication style? And what is that one little tricky area that you know, and we all have one, that you are wanting to work on? Start to think for yourself, what is that little piece that you would like to master? And then set a goal for yourself. Make it a challenge. And every day, start to try to chip away at that. Start to show up differently. Start to play with that and see what feels natural and right for you. And then you will start to notice and recognize how you can start to adapt in various scenarios. All right, thanks again for joining me. And let me know in the comments, what is the piece that you're going to be working on this week?